I've always loved the Pacific Coast Highway, at least during the day. You know the type of scenic drive I mean. Cliffs dropping into a sparkling ocean, the sun painting everything gold. It's picture perfect, the kind of route that tourists flock to. But the PCH at night, especially off-season when few travelers are around, can feel like a completely different world. The endless curve of dark ocean to one side and silent, looming cliffs on the other can be strangely oppressive. I learned that the hard way on a late December drive a few years back, and I still have trouble believing what I saw that night. I was driving north after visiting a friend in Santa Barbara. It was close to midnight, and I'd miscalculated my schedule. I wanted to reach Big Sur by morning, so I figured I'd push through. The sky was moonless, the ocean invisible except for the faint shimmer when my headlights caught a flash of surf far below. Traffic had vanished. No taillights ahead, no headlights behind. Just me, my old sedan, and the whisper of wind coming off the Pacific. I was about 2 hours into the drive when I first noticed something odd. A figure standing on one of the narrow overlooks, where a guardrail separated asphalt from a deadly drop. Just a silhouette at first, a dark shape against the faint starlight. I slowed out of curiosity, illuminating the figure for a brief moment. It was a man, or maybe a teenager, wearing a hooded sweatshirt. He stood too close to the edge, looking down at the black water. As I passed, he glanced up. The shine of my headlights caught his face, and I swear his eyes reflected light like an animal's. I got a chill and pressed the gas. Maybe he'd broken down, maybe he was contemplating something grim. Either way, I wasn't about to stop for a stranger on a deserted stretch of coastal highway. I drove on, telling myself it was just a weird encounter. It's not unusual to see night fishermen or loners out there. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of his stare lingering on my car, as if he knew me or wanted something from me. About 20 minutes later, the road curved inland, winding through a stretch of cypress trees that blocked any view of the ocean. The darkness thickened here, the trees creating a tunnel that my headlights struggled to penetrate. That's when I saw him again, standing near a small sign marking a scenic turnout. The same hoodie, the same stance, too close to the edge where a rough trail led down toward the water. My heart thumped. There was no way he could have gotten there before me. I'd been driving a steady 50 or 60 miles per hour. He would have had to run across impassable terrain to beat me to that spot. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a different person wearing a similar hoodie. Coincidences happen. Still, I couldn't ignore the dread creeping up my spine. This time, I didn't slow down. I just caught a glimpse in my peripheral vision. He was facing my car again, head tilted slightly, as if listening. I sped up. My gas gauge dipped lower than I liked, and I realized I'd have to stop soon. There was a tiny convenience store and fuel pump somewhere ahead. I remembered it from a summer trip. It was probably closed at this hour, but the pump might still accept cards. Anything to feel less isolated. Sure enough, after another half hour of tense driving, I saw a dim sign and a single yellow bulb illuminating a gravel lot. The place looked abandoned. No cars, no lights inside, but the pump displayed a credit card slot. I pulled in, killed the engine, and stepped out. The quiet was unsettling. No sound but distant waves and wind rustling dry grass. As I fumbled with my card, I felt a presence. You know that prickling on the back of your neck when someone watches you? I looked around and saw nothing. Just the old building, its windows boarded up, and a flimsy wooden picnic table off to the side. I swiped my card. Declined. Tried again. Declined. My heart sank. I'd have to get gas elsewhere, but I couldn't afford to run too low. Then I heard a faint scraping noise, like a shoe scuffing gravel. I spun toward the sound. A figure stood at the far edge of the lot, near a scraggly bush. The same hoodie, the same posture. He raised his hand and curled his fingers, beckoning. My breath caught. I jumped into my car and locked the doors. For a split second, he was framed in my rearview mirror. No details, just darkness under the hood, but I felt his eyes on me. I slammed the gas and sped back onto the highway, tires kicking up dust. My heart hammered. I didn't understand how he was following me. The PCH is treacherous at night, no shortcuts, no easy paths. Had I stumbled into some local trying to scare me? Or was something else happening? Something I couldn't explain? About 15 minutes later, the road opened up along a cliff edge again. I forced myself to slow down, to stay calm. The ocean spread out in inky blackness to my left, the cliff face to my right. That's when my headlights caught movement. A shape darting across the road ahead, impossibly fast. I hit the brakes. The car skidded and I nearly lost control. For a second, I thought I'd careen over the edge, but I stopped inches from the guardrail. My headlights shone onto empty asphalt. No one there. Panting, I eased the car forward. A tapping sound on the passenger window made me scream. I jerked my head. He was outside my window, face pressed to the glass. This time I saw his features, or lack thereof. His face was pale and smooth. No eyebrows, eyes too large and reflecting my own terrified expression. His lips curved into a slight smirk, as if amused. I slammed the accelerator. The car lurched forward. How he avoided getting run over, I don't know. I didn't stop to find out. I drove recklessly for miles, heart in my throat, convinced he'd appear around every curve. I considered calling the police, but what would I say? That a man keeps appearing ahead of me, impossibly fast? It must have been close to 3 a.m. when I finally saw the lights of a roadside motel. I pulled in, desperate for human company. I expected the office to be locked, but an older woman sat inside, half asleep at the desk. She blinked at me, startled, as I rushed in. I must have looked wild, sweating and eyes darting around. I rented a room without haggling over the price. Once inside, I double-locked the door and closed the curtains. Took hours for my heart to slow. Sunrise was just a glow on the horizon when I dared to look out the window. The parking lot was empty except for my car. No sign of him. In the morning light, I felt foolish. I told myself it was a hallucination caused by exhaustion. But when I walked to my car, I found something wedged under the wiper blade. A small piece of driftwood, carved with a crude face, large eyes and a thin smile. I dropped it, stomach twisting. My hands shook as I climbed in and continued north, determined to forget. I never saw him again, but I refused to drive the PCH at night now. Sometimes I wonder if he was real, some drifter with an uncanny ability to move. Or maybe the road itself birthed him from the dark ocean and endless cliffs. A manifestation of my fears, feeding off my terror. I'll never know. All I do know is that the Pacific Coast Highway, beautiful by day, can hide unimaginable things once night falls. If you ever find yourself driving that route alone under a moonless sky, don't stop. Don't slow down. And if you see a figure waiting along the guardrail, don't look too closely at his face. Story to Mark Coleman. It started as a simple idea. Take a road trip along the Pacific Coast Highway from Los Angeles to San Francisco. My girlfriend Elise and I planned it as a romantic getaway. Scenic cliffs, seaside towns, maybe spotting whales off the coast. We chose late spring, hoping for fewer tourists. The day was gorgeous when we set out. Blue skies, a gentle breeze. Nothing could have hinted at what we'd encounter after sundown. We spent the morning cruising, stopping at vista points, snapping photos. By evening, we were behind schedule. The plan was to reach Monterey by 10 p.m., find a motel, and enjoy a midnight stroll by the harbor lights. But a minor breakdown, our radiator started overheating, delayed us by hours. By the time we were back on the road, the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving only a faint afterglow. Elise dozed in the passenger seat while I navigated twisting turns. The PCH at night felt quieter than I expected. We encountered barely any cars, just the hum of the engine, the distant crash of waves, and the halo of headlights showing the narrow road. Occasionally, I'd glimpse the ocean far below, silver patches of moonlit water. Somewhere past Big Sur, near a stretch of road carved into the cliff, my headlights swept over something unusual. A wooden sign I didn't remember from previous trips, leaning askew by the guardrail. It looked old, the paint peeling, the words unreadable. I slowed slightly, puzzled. But Elise was asleep, and I didn't want to wake her just to examine a random sign. Then I rounded a curve and saw a car stopped in the middle of the road. I hit the brakes, heart jumping. It was a vintage convertible, pale blue with its top down. No hazards flashing, no one waving for help. Just sitting there, blocking my lane. I flicked my high beams. The car's door creaked open. A woman stepped out. She wore a dress that seemed too formal for a late-night drive. Something like a 1950s cocktail dress, pale and flowing. Her long dark hair covered half her face. She turned slowly to face my car. I rolled down my window an inch, ready to ask if she needed assistance, but something stopped me. She was barefoot, and her skin looked strangely reflective in the headlights. She lifted a hand, beckoning me closer. No words spoken. My instincts flared. This wasn't normal. Who stands in the middle of the PCH at night, dressed like that, without speaking? I honked lightly. Elise stirred, muttering. The woman stepped forward. I could see her face better now. Her eyes were wide, pupils so large they swallowed any color. Her lips parted in what looked like a silent gasp. I felt a surge of alarm. I didn't want her near us. I reversed carefully, but the road behind was a tight curve. Before I could maneuver, the woman reached the passenger door. She pressed her hand against the window, leaning close. Her nails tapped softly. Elise woke fully now, startled. The woman mouthed something we couldn't hear. No sound reached us, just the faint hiss of wind. What does she want? Elise whispered. I don't know, I said, throat dry. Should we ask if she's hurt? As if answering, the woman smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile, more like a too-wide grin that showed too many teeth. She lifted her other hand. Something dangled from her fingers, a necklace or charm that glinted in the light. She raised it slowly, placing it against the glass. Took me a moment to realize it was a car key, bent and twisted out of shape. My stomach sank. I tried to turn the wheel and squeeze past her car. There was just enough room. As I inched forward, her eyes tracked us, never blinking. Elise locked her door, and I rolled my window up fully. The woman tapped once more, harder now. I pressed the gas, forcing my sedan around the still car. The tires grazed the edge of the cliff, sending pebbles tumbling into darkness. I didn't look at the woman again. Once past her, I accelerated, heart pounding. Elise glanced back, then gasped. I risked a look in the mirror. The woman's car had vanished. The road was empty behind us, just darkness and our receding taillights. We drove in tense silence for a few miles. Elise kept asking what just happened, but I had no answers. Eventually, we decided we must have hallucinated something. Night driving and stress from the earlier breakdown could mess with our heads. Then we saw another car ahead, headlights parked on the shoulder. I slowed to see if they needed help. Elise gripped my arm. "Don't stop," she said, voice trembling. But we were already close enough to see a figure standing by the guardrail. A man this time dressed in old-fashioned clothes, a suit that looked decades out of style. He stared at us as we passed. No expression, just a blank gaze. In his hand, he held something metallic, a single car key, bent at an odd angle. My mind reeled. This couldn't be a coincidence. I pressed the gas, ignoring the man. In the mirror, I watched as he stepped onto the highway, right into our lane, his figure diminishing as we sped away. He didn't chase us, didn't flinch. After that, every few miles we'd see them. People dressed strangely, standing beside old, abandoned-looking cars, each holding a twisted key or some piece of scrap metal. They never spoke. Some smiled, some cried silently, others just stared. Each time, the car they stood next to would vanish the moment we passed, as if it had never been there. Fear turned to panic. We couldn't keep driving like this, but stopping felt suicidal. I considered turning around, heading back south, but that meant retracing our path through who knows what horrors. After what felt like hours, we reached a stretch of road lit faintly by the distant glow of a small community. Houses, street lamps, the promise of other people. The apparitions, or whatever they were, stopped appearing. We rolled into a tiny coastal village, really just a cluster of houses near a fishing dock. A single motel sign flickered. Vacancy. We checked in. The desk clerk, an older man with kind eyes, noticed our shaken state. "Long night on the PCH?" he asked gently. We nodded. Elise tried to explain. Strange people, vanished cars. But the clerk just gave a sad smile and said we weren't the first to see weird things on that stretch. "This highway has stories," he said. "Accidents from decades ago. People who never got where they were going. Sometimes folks say they still wander, lost between the cliffs and the sea." We asked if he was joking. He just shrugged. "I don't have an explanation, just rumors. Best get some rest." In our room, we locked the door and left the bathroom light on. Neither of us slept well. At dawn, I stepped outside. The ocean breeze smelled normal, fresh and salty. The motel parking lot looked ordinary. I almost convinced myself it was a collective nightmare. Then I noticed something on our car's hood. A small scratch etched into the paint, shaped like a bent key. I ran my finger over it. It was real. Elise saw it too and paled. We decided to end the trip early, heading inland to reach San Francisco by a different route. As we left the coast behind, I glanced one last time at the ocean, beautiful and calm under a morning sun. Hard to believe what we'd seen lurked in that darkness just hours before. We've never driven the Pacific Coast Highway at night again. Whenever we talk about that trip, Elise and I choose our words carefully. We don't know if they were ghosts, echoes of old accidents, or something else entirely. But we know that past midnight on that scenic route, strange passengers appear and disappear. Maybe they're waiting for a ride, or maybe they're stuck forever. All I know is, if I ever see a lone figure standing on the PCH at night, I'll keep driving, no matter how desperate they look. Story 3: Thean Ridge. It was supposed to be a straightforward photography assignment. I'd been hired by a small travel magazine to capture the rugged beauty of the Pacific Coast Highway off-season. They wanted moody shots. Empty beaches, mist-shrouded cliffs, and that sense of melancholy you sometimes get when summer tourists are long gone. I was excited. Just me, my camera gear, and a rental car, chasing the perfect dawn and dusk light. I started in Ventura and moved north slowly, taking my time, shooting breathtaking vistas. By the fourth day, I was near a remote stretch past Ragged Point, where the cliffs get higher and the pull-offs fewer. The afternoon went well. I got some fantastic shots of storm clouds over the ocean. As night approached, I realized I'd made a mistake. I hadn't booked a motel far enough ahead. The nearest lodging was miles away. I figured I could camp in my car at one of the roadside overlooks. People did that sometimes, and I had a sleeping bag for emergencies. I found a particularly isolated turnout with enough space to park safely. The sound of waves far below was oddly comforting. I shot a few evening photos, capturing the last light fading from the sky. Then I settled in, locking the doors, planning to wake early for sunrise shots. Around midnight, I awoke to a soft tapping sound. My car windows were fogged from my breath, and for a moment, I thought it might be rain. But no, it was too rhythmic. Tap, tap, tap. I sat up, heart pounding. Flicking on the dome light, I peered through the windshield. Nothing, just darkness and a sliver of moonlight on the guardrail. I told myself it was probably a branch or maybe a bird. I turned off the light and tried to sleep again. That's when the tapping resumed, this time on the back window. Faster now. I spun around, pressing my face to the rear glass. A shape darted out of view, something pale against the dark. I fumbled for my flashlight, heart racing. Opening the car door felt like a terrible idea, but what choice did I have? If someone was messing with me, I needed to show I wasn't helpless. I cracked the door open, flashlight in hand, and stepped out into the chilly night. Silence except for the ocean below. The beam of my flashlight revealed the edge of the cliff, the guardrail, and a patch of scrubby grass. No footprints, I looked around nervously. Was an animal curious about my car? Then I saw something on the guardrail. A small piece of driftwood carved into a rough figurine. It looked eerily similar to a person, arms raised. I hadn't noticed it before. With trembling fingers, I picked it up. Who would leave this here? I got back in the car, locked the doors, and decided to move. I drove to a less isolated spot. As I started the engine, my headlights swept across the turnout, revealing a figure standing a few yards away. They were hunched over, wearing a coat too large for their frame. I couldn't see their face, just a silhouette. My stomach lurched. They hadn't been there seconds ago. I revved the engine, headlights fixed on the figure. Slowly, they raised a hand and pointed down the highway, northward. I couldn't understand why. I didn't want to. I put the car in reverse, trying to turn around, but the turnout was tight, and I was shaking. I glanced back at the figure. Gone. Just emptiness. I managed to get the car facing south, deciding to return the way I came. But a few miles down, I spotted a dim glow on the side of the road, like a lantern or a flashlight. Drawn despite my fear, I slowed. It might be someone actually needing help. My conscience nagged me. With a deep breath, I pulled over. I stepped out with my flashlight again, calling softly, "Hello? You okay?" No answer. I followed the glow into a cluster of boulders. On a flat stone, I found another carved figurine, identical to the first. The glow was from a small LED tea light placed beside it. Confusion and dread tangled in my gut. My car keys rattled in my hand as I backed away. Suddenly, footsteps behind me. I whipped around to see two people standing there. If people is the right word. They were tall and thin, their features indistinct in the dim light, as if their faces lacked detail. One raised an arm, beckoning, while the other held something out. A camera, old-fashioned, with a large flashbulb. I spoke, voice cracking, "What do you want?" They didn't respond. Instead, the one with the camera lifted it and the flash fired silently, blinding me. I stumbled, seeing spots. When my vision cleared, they were gone, replaced by a faint whisper of laughter that drifted on the wind. I scrambled back to my car and locked myself inside, chest heaving. I was done. No more stopping. I drive until I found a motel or a truck stop, anywhere with other people. I checked my phone, no signal. Typical on this stretch. I drove fast, rounding cliff sides and tight curves, praying for a sign of civilization. That's when I saw a shape dart across the road ahead. So quick I couldn't identify it. I swerved and nearly hit the guardrail. My heart hammered. The beam of my headlights caught a fleeting glimpse of something crouched at the roadside, watching. I pressed on, refusing to slow. 10 minutes later, a car appeared behind me, headlights bright. Relief flooded me. Another traveler, but the relief didn't last. The car stayed far behind, never closing in, never falling back, just tailing me at a consistent distance. I tried slowing down to let it pass. It slowed too. I sped up. It matched my speed. A chill sank into my bones. I remembered the camera flash, the figurines, the silent figures. Eventually, a small gas station sign appeared. A miracle. I turned off, the other car continuing straight past. I pulled into a gravel lot lit by a single fluorescent tube. The station was closed, but at least it wasn't pitch-black emptiness. I slumped over the wheel, forcing my breathing to steady. Then I noticed the display window of the station's minimart. Something was propped behind the glass, a Polaroid photo. I got out slowly to look. The photo showed a car parked at a turnout. My car. Me stepping out, flashlight in hand. In the background, barely visible, were two silhouettes. My stomach twisted. That camera flash, they had taken my picture. Hands shaking, I ran back to my car. On the windshield, another wooden figurine waited, this one carved with an elongated head. I swore loudly, brushed it off, and started the engine again. I didn't care about lodging. I'd drive until sunrise if I had to. I did just that, kept going, eyes peeled for anything unnatural. The rest of the night, I saw only empty road. Maybe they let me go, bored with their game. Maybe the gas station display was a final scare. At dawn, I reached a small coastal town. Fishermen were loading boats, bakeries were opening. The normalcy almost brought me to tears. I parked on a busy street and stepped out into the mild morning air. The ocean looked so peaceful, gentle waves rolling in. Hard to believe that just hours before, I'd been hounded by impossible apparitions. I called my client and made an excuse. I'd have to end the assignment early. They weren't pleased, but I didn't care. I'd gotten enough shots, I said, and sent what I had. Then I left the coast, heading inland, away from that haunting stretch of highway. To this day, I still have those photos. Beautiful images of a coastline in winter's quiet. But I can't look at them without remembering the silhouettes, the tapping on my car window, the flash that came out of nowhere. I never found a logical explanation. Maybe I ran into restless spirits, echoes of old accidents along the cliffs. Maybe ancient legends walk that highway after dark, drawn to travelers who dare to sleep alone in their cars. All I know is that something watches along those desolate stretches of the PCH. Something that leaves carved tokens, takes your picture, and vanishes into the night. If you ever travel that scenic route with a camera in hand, be careful. Beauty can hide terrible secrets, and when the sun goes down, you might not be the only one capturing memories.